Almost. Hey everyone, and welcome to Chef AJ and Friends. I'm your host, Chef AJ, and my friend today is none other than the co-author of The Pleasure Trap, Dr. Doug Lisle. It's the first Tuesday of the month. We call this Straight Talk with Dr. Doug Lisle, and if you send us your question in advance, he'll answer it personally. Please welcome him back. Hi, Dr. Lisle. You look a little different today.
Huh. I don't know why.
It looks like you shaved.
Maybe, yeah, I'm so burly by nature that, if I take out the machete and chop some of it off, then, things look different.
That's funny. Well, you ready to hop? If you have any announcements or anything you want to say, go ahead. Otherwise, we'll hop right into the questions.
No, we're good to go.
So this is a little long, but I want to read it because I think the context it's also very well written, and it's from Hamilton. I used to think that high-end Michelin restaurants were a real thing. Now I realize those restaurants are just price gouging entities that have mastered human addictive bliss points in food using SOS chemicals, triggering our neuropleasure centers with frankenfood and super stimuli. Whether on a cruise in a city center, so much social entertainment and engagement is focused around poisonous food and alcohol, sad food, and there's just no escaping this sad, pun intended, reality. My question is, now that I'm adhering to a whole food plant-based diet, the healthy lifestyle can be psychologically isolating, as drunk food gorging people I no longer desire to be myself, nor to be around at all. All our lives, our loving familial bonds and friendship interactions were sadly at the core of these at the table. Familial social events, interactions, Thanksgiving, birthday celebrations, lunches, and dinners. Dr. Lisle, I find it increasingly difficult to look forward to the upcoming holiday meals with family and the rest of the human race due to my new plant-based, SOS-free, alcohol-avoiding healthy lifestyle. Any thoughts on accepting this isolation are appreciated.
Yeah. This is going to be sort of a personal decision for every individual, and there's no right or wrong answer. But when it comes to optimizing your decision making in your life, what we try to do is we try to estimate the variables, or what I call the parameters, as best we can. So I look forward to the holidays. I look forward to all the food that's around. That food is not going to be SOS free. It's going to be pretty good. I'm going to eat pretty healthy food. But I'm not going to worry about SOS free. SOS is our ancestors didn't eat oil, but occasionally they would get chunks of animal fat, and so that they probably stirred that in with their potatoes and their broccoli. They also absolutely ate sugar. They ate large amounts of honey throughout the course of human natural history. So that's where your sweet tooth comes from. And undoubtedly, they used honey at times to sweeten up different things that they were eating. So that's a reality. Many of our ancestors essentially evolved along the oceans, the world's oceans, and they were exposed to high quantities of sodium from eating sea vegetables and fish, etc. So SOS free you need to have an eyebrow raised about what that should really mean. That shouldn't mean that we eat steamed potatoes, steamed broccoli, and that we never have something that has high fat in it, or high sodium in it, or high sugar in it. It doesn't make any sense. Okay. So if you look at AJ's cookbook, Sweet Indulgence, there's a high sugar content in there, as there should be. But those sugars have been carefully curated to be coming from natural sources that are going to be healthier than something that's been refined. All right. So I can go to a holiday dinner and I'll look forward to, even as you mention it, I'm thinking about eating some stuffing that somebody made. Okay. So I'm not going to eat the turkey. That's not going to happen. There's going to be but I'm going to be eating cranberry sauce. There's going to be all kinds of things that I'll be eating. And I'm not worried about the fact that some of it's been doctored up to some degree. It's not a big deal. Now, so I don't worry about, hanging out with some friends that aren't trying to eat SOS free, because I'm going to go to a restaurant, and I go fairly often, and it's never going to be SOS free. I'm going to make good choices. Okay. So the SOS is something that was, I don't know who invented it, but the first time I heard it was Alan Goldhammer. And I heard this probably 15 years ago. He's very proud of himself. I think he might have invented it, or he where he's taking credit for it, that somebody whispered it in his ear, some intern. So just in case any poor little interns that are ever around us, if you ever say anything really intelligent, we'll steal it and we'll become known for it. Yeah. Um, so let's get the right frame. Now, you may be someone who has struggled with food addictive problems for your life and that they were devastating for you, and that the way out of it was to get unbelievably clean. And that enables you to stay on a really healthy pathway and not get tempted and get dragged into the pleasure trap. So you have a legitimate and appropriate anxiety and fear of dancing any closer to the fire than you are. And so you are going to keep yourself away from those people and those things. I don't object to that. I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm saying I don't do that, and then I'm none the worse for wear. The diet that I personally basically subscribed to was the old standard McDougall diet. The old standard McDougall diet was, I think it was oil free, but it wasn't going to be sugar free, and it wasn't going to be salt free, and it certainly wasn't fat free. But it was a low fat diet, that's to be sure. But the John McDougall's McDougall plan was a very, very healthy diet that actually even basically said it would say things like this and that kind of food to be avoided, to be avoided, to be avoided. In other words, he said, hey, I'm going to eat turkey on Thanksgiving. Now, he changed his mind later, became more animal rights sensitive. But that wasn't really behind health issues specifically. It was behind animal rights issues. John became convinced, and he became, born again when it came about animal rights, and then it went all the way to the whole planet and global warming and everything else. In other words, that became far more of a political and rights issue and a humanitarian issue than it had to do with health. Okay, so just keep in mind this is where we come from. So with that in mind, in other words, what I'm trying to do for an awful lot of people with this answer is to give you like special dispensation from the Pope to tell you that you can go to your people's get-togethers and you can eat some things that are a little naughty and just keep your head about you. You know what I'm saying? I can go into any place, and the places where I go, they know that, hey, make some mashed potatoes, but all I'm going to do is I'm going to put a little pepper on them when I get there. Please leave mine aside in a separate pot. You know what I mean? Obviously, this isn't a get together of 40 people that we barely know each other and we're just sort of family and et cetera. No, these are people close to me that know who I am and know how I like things. So they have vegetables that they're cooked. When they're cooking the vegetables, they're going to cook them and not drown mine in butter. Let's just set it to the side. So, but I'm there with everybody, and I'm not making anybody uncomfortable. I'm eating what I'm eating, and they're eating what they're eating, and nobody's having a problem, and it's all good. Okay. So, and I'm not trying to be Simon Pure. And yeah, they will have some vegan pumpkin pie there to make sure that I can eat some of it. So that's how I look at these problems. I'm able to go out to dinner. I probably got this lingering cough because I didn't follow an SOS-free diet in the last month, and Alan is going to say, "See, look at that guy's coughing." No, I know. I've had this lingering cough for 6 weeks. I don't know what it is. But anyway, that's what I'm trying to do, is to basically loosen the reins a little bit, people. We don't need to make this an all or nothing issue. We need to make this an intelligent issue. Okay. A kid that gets 94 on the math final gets an A in math class. You want an A in this class. We don't need to get a perfect paper. And so keep that in mind.
So there's many pearls of wisdom what you said, but I want to say, like, alcohol might be a different issue. Some people, like if somebody is a recovering alcoholic, it can be really hard for them to be around a lot of alcohol.
No question. These are, like I said, there's not one size fits all. And there are people that have lost 150 pounds, and it took the journey of a lifetime to do it. And they should not be having any of the stuff that I'm talking about. They should not have the stuffing. Okay, so there's or it's probably really not in their best interest to do that. So everybody's going to be in a somewhat different space here, but keep in mind that your ancestors did some indulging. They did. Okay, so you have a legitimate birthright to some indulging. That indulging didn't include Jack Daniels and didn't include ice cream, but it included some things that had effectively some oil and some sugar and some salt in it, without a doubt. Okay, and so that didn't cause them to go crazy or dislike all the rest of their food, et cetera, et cetera. These were minor issues, but not things that we need to be catastrophizing.
Do you think it's helpful that people have to know themselves, right?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, because you mentioned loosen the reins, and I've worked with you as a client for like 15 years now, and I've been very, very Goldhammer perfect, and I've really loosened the reins. But I did that after a period of
10
being
years.
compliant, and I'm wondering if for some people it might, because I've actually heard you say this to one person, that maybe have an experiment of doing it exactly that way for a little bit and see how that feels. Because I don't know if I could have had the success I had if I just went in it with the attitude that a little bit won't hurt.
Beautiful. Very, very, very well said, AJ. And so, yeah, that's well considered. Good.
Yeah. So like learn how to shoot the basketball correctly before you do your all.
Yeah. Well said. Excellent. Yes.
Okay. Because I did learn how to shoot a basketball correctly.
Yes.
From Dr. Goldhammer, and I didn't realize you need your legs to do it. I was just doing all this, and it would hurt.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So now I know. Oh, thank you. The next question is from Amanda. Dr. Lisle, do you recommend to include other strategies beyond food to help get out of the pleasure trap? I saw that introducing other ways to get pleasure with healthy habits helps resynchronize the dopamine circuit. Like, for example, listening to classical music, doing exercise. Is it really helpful with regards to our brain, and can it make a difference?
I'm not sure. It's kind of I think that those of us that have ever exercised regularly, we can report something interesting, which is that if you then have an injury or you start to get away from it, you miss it. And so it could be something that you didn't miss when you weren't doing it. So in other words, there's an interesting adaptation to doing things in the right way that is very satisfying, and then it makes it easy to keep it because you actually like it. It feels good, and you can integrate those feelings into your memories and assessment of the whole process. So I think that's a good thing. I think that if you can establish good sleep habits, that's a good thing. I'm someone that bounces around on that, but I've never been an easy sleeper. I've always been jealous of my friend Alan. Alan Goldhammer is an unbelievably easy sleeper. Yeah, he can literally, you can be talking in the middle of a big, deep discussion at 1 a.m, and then he can look at the clock and say, "Well, I got to be up early. I got to go to bed." And it's like, that's fine for you, but I'm going to be up for the next hour and a half spinning about what we just talked about. So, and he will. Obviously we were kids. We spent time together at each other's houses and backpacking and so forth. And that guy can literally sit in a chair and start to relax, and that guy can go out and like he's going to be gone in 1 minute. And I'm like, that's an unbelievable skill. And I read that actually has to do with how much sleep debt you have. And I read these books, and it's like, with all due respect to William Dement and some of these sleep giants, you're wrong. Like I've watched my best friend that is an incredibly skilled sleeper. He has some bizarre ability to relax and just conk out whenever he wants, which is just outrageous as far as I'm concerned. Not whenever he wants, not if he's fully sleep satiated, but he has no problem going to sleep, but I do. So therefore I'm more erratic in that way. And when I get in a groove and do a good job and can get a rhythm, then my life's better. And I wake up in the morning, like today, I feel really good. If I wake up in the morning and I'm really well sleep satiated and I'm on a good schedule, it's a better life. And then when I let that get out of line, it's not as good. And I'm like, well, you asked for it. You are the author of The Pleasure Trap. You had a chapter in there called Let There Be Light. By the way, I was really proud of myself when I thought of the title for that chapter. I thought, God, that's perfect. Now, I remember thinking of I can remember where I was when I thought of both the title and the story that I was going to tell. It was going to be of Thomas Edison. It was just like, that's it. That's how we're going to tell the sleep story. So the so anyway, the point is that I'm with you that good habits build their own momentum. They build their own motivational circuitry, and it can be very helpful. And that goes with healthy food too. So there was a time when I got away from eating salad because it was just kind of a hassle. And Alan gave me this home salad bar that he had discovered, this 10, 15 years ago. And it never kind of clicked. And I would eat my salads at other places where I could buy them. But then, one day I decided, you know what, I'm going to start buying that bagged lettuce instead of chopping it up. And so now that's what I do. So I just buy the bags of lettuce. It always feels like I'm getting ripped off a little bit. It's like, no, you're not getting ripped off. Otherwise, you won't eat the lettuce. Okay. So now I've got that, and now I do salads all the time. Whereas 10 years ago, I didn't. And I didn't because I was getting stopped by a channel factor. And now when I ate salads every day, when Alan and I worked at a place where across the street at Fresh Choice, we could get salads every day, I looked forward to that salad every day. And then when we moved the offices, when we moved out of and moved up to Santa Rosa, no salad bar. And the salad bar at True North didn't have the stuff that I liked that was in the other salad bar. And so now suddenly it's like I'm not very motivated to go in there and do that. It just channel factors, bad habits, then things get to the side. So yes, there are other ways than, there are these other elements: sleep, exercise, diet. These things are, important parts of the rhythm of life. And working to get each of them in concert. There's a place in The Pleasure Trap late. I think it's The Myths of Moderation. There's a paragraph in there that I write where I talk about how I believe it's in that chapter where I talk about sometimes it's actually easier to do everything right at once than it is to do them piecemeal. Not always. I'm not prescribing that this is how it has to be, but sometimes that is how it is. Sometimes to turn over a new leaf and do, get your sleep and your exercise and your diet all together at the same time, get all three balls in the air, then you'll feel better enough doing that you'll want to defend it. And so, yeah, I think that all three of those things are important.
Great.
All
Thank
right.
you. Yeah, I think Dr. Barnard had done a lecture on something with the dopamine in the brain, and he plays in a band. He plays, yeah.
Good,
So
good for him. Yeah.
yeah, cool. Okay, thank you. So Vicky says, I'm hoping to learn how to respond to the naysayers without coming across as judging their food choices. It seems to always turn into a debate. How can I avoid this ongoing pitfall? And why are others intent on analyzing our food, commenting usually negatively, and tempting us, even if we say our choices are for health issues? Are there friendly strategies to counteract this?
Yes. Well, in The Pleasure Trap, there's a chapter called Getting Along Without Going Along. And there's a lecture that I've given that you can go on my website, or you can probably get it on the general internet, called Getting Along Without Going Along. So that lecture takes you through the logic. And I'm not going to reiterate that today and just give you the punchline, because I have discovered as a psychologist that telling people what to do isn't such a good idea. What's a good idea is to tell them the reasons why they should do it. And then once they understand the underlying reason, then it's compelling. Then it's like, okay, this is the only reasonable way to do things, is to do it in this way, because now I understand the underlying logic. You must understand the esteem processes that are sitting at the root of our problems with other people in this way. Once you understand those esteem processes more clearly, you'll never not see them. Okay? It's like, seeing an alligator. Once you've seen one, you can't not see it. You're like, oh my God, I know what an alligator is. It's like once you understand how critical and central esteem processes are to human nature, you will then understand the nature of the problems that you're facing in this domain, and you'll be able to then use my very simple, elegant solutions to those problems. So that's what I'm going to tell. That's where I'm going to leave that question. I'll leave that right there. Go online. You can go to my website if nowhere else. Look under classic lectures. It's on the free side of the website. That's called I don't know, the public library. Okay, so we've got just like everybody else. We got the like paid little secret sauce where you get into stuff that, there's other stuff on the paid side of the library that are not important to this question at all. But in there, the classic lectures, I think it was probably the one that I did at a McDougall program at some point. Is Getting Along Without Going Along. Take a look at that, and that will give you everything that you need to know to answer that question.
So it's also dependent on a person's personality, right? Because how I answer
Yes.
is going to be different than how Linda Middlesworth answers and how Dr. Goldhammer answers, which would be like, well, I'm not going to eat that. Why? Because I don't want to get fat and sick and die,
Right. The truth of the matter is the answers I have given are for 99% of humanity. The other half of the percent, Linda can't do it to save her life, and Alan won't do it to save his. So the rest of us can. So yes, admitted that there are going to be some people that this isn't going to fly for, but you undoubtedly can. The person who's asking this question, this answer will work for you.
Yeah. Well, I found I truly do have food allergies, and I find that usually works.
Yeah. Oh, that's good. That's really good. Yeah. Some people have, moral qualms about saying something that may not quite be true. But that's true enough, and that's true enough. That absolutely works.
Yeah. And I'm not making it up, so I can say it. So it's not like I'm it's definitive. It's
Yes. Good.
okay.
All reasonable. But yeah, there's ways we don't have to go there, and those are buried in that lecture.
Thank you. Dr. Lisle, do you think that people who eat a whole food plant-based diet are at risk for developing orthorexia, an unhealthy obsession with eating, quote, pure foods?
I don't think it's the act of eating the healthy food that does it. I think it's the personality it's like a train wreck that was bound to happen. So I have occasionally run into people in this space that are essentially riding the edge of that, and I have cured a bunch of people sometimes in 15 minutes over this, and that's because most of these people, what they have is very high conscientiousness, and that is what this is, and they have been bombarded with evidence from people that seem extremely trustworthy. Colin Campbell, Caldwell Esselstyn, Neil Barnard, Joel Furman, Alan Goldhammer, John McDougall, etc. They bombarded with information that all sounds like it's singing a very similar tune, and therefore they believe it, and they're right to believe it. But what they are missing is that they are missing the what we're going to call in science the variance. Okay, and the variance is effectively, how much more life are we talking about? If you were to ask the average indoctrinated, hyperconscientious vegan how much life that it was costing their husband to be eating the stuff that he's eating, she's 47 and he's 49, and she's terrified because she watches him eating cheeseburgers and she feels like he's killing himself. Okay. And if you were to ask her, well, how long do you think he's going to live? She'd say, I don't know. Like, it's a walking time bomb. And when I tell her, no, actually, his life expectancy is 82, eating the way he's eating. Okay. And then I get a shocked look on their face. And then I say, and if he eats the way you want him to eat for the rest of his life expectancy is 85 and a half. That's the truth. Okay. It's like, oh, that's not anything close to what they thought the truth was. They thought that it was 10 years, 15 years, maybe 20 years. They had no idea that it was 3.5 years was the variable. And so now, so we can look at that and we could say, yes, but what about the quality of life? Oh, that's a very big deal. But you can also adjust that when you're 75 and you're in congestive heart failure. You can like put down the frickin' turkey. You know what I'm saying? You can do it then, and then you can get substantially recover. So there's no crisis to be doing this when you're 49. Now, are you playing a little bit of Russian roulette? Yeah, but there's 100 spaces in the gun and only one of them has a bullet in it. You probably aren't going to die at 56 of a heart attack. What about if your numbers look like this and look like that? Okay, well, at some point, the wife's got a beef with this. At some point you could give me the evidence. Well, he also smokes and he also does this and he's 100 pounds overweight. Okay, well, now we got a different picture. But the point is that the reason why people could get orthorexic is orthorexic meaning a fancy new term, i.e., you're just too damn fastidious and you become OCD-ish about your food. Okay. But a lot of people that I listen to that are, quote, orthorexic are actually perfectly reasonable. In fact, most of them are. They're intelligent. They're well-informed. Okay. It's just that they don't have a gauge for what the variance is on this problem. And they don't know. And so because they're extremely high conscientious, it's like, well, if I don't know, if I don't know what something is in a jar, I'm not going to drink it, for God's sakes. Why would I do that? How do I know it's not acid? And so they're having a reasonable, that very same reasonable concern is what drove Alan Goldhammer and I at 18 years old to investigate this. We were like, yeah, I think maybe we ought to look into this. This is pretty smart. We ought to be paying attention to what we put on our bodies, for God's sake. It's probably a pretty big deal. So we're lucky. We're just so lucky that we went on a backpacking trip when we were 16 and he didn't pack enough food. And it struck a nerve in that guy's brain that said, wow, food's a really big deal. I feel out of control out here. Like, it never occurred to us because we're just a couple of middle-class kids who never had a day where we were hungry. And so suddenly that dawned on Alan that food was a big deal. I remember that conversation like it was yesterday. That was 50 years ago. And I remember that tent that we were in. I remember, it was dusk when we were having that conversation. And I remember him, we were in bed and he's saying, when we get back, I'm going to look into this food thing. And I remember what I was thinking. I'm coming back. I'm getting a pizza. And all I could think was choose. That's all that was in my head. Like, man, I want a pizza. I want a pizza. That's what and Alan's like, I'm looking into this food thing. This food thing is a much bigger deal than I thought. And when he went home and he instantly got himself a job at a natural food store. And once he was there, he started reading every book in the place. He ran into a 28-year-old dude with perfect teeth, handsome as hell, really nice guy by the name of all things, Steve Plant. That guy's name was Steve Plant. And Steve Plant had a degree in horticulture from Humboldt State University, and he was all into natural hygiene. And that is where we learned about this. So without Steve Plant in the world and without that backpacking trip, I wouldn't know anything about this. I'd be on statins right now. Okay. So, because I have naturally high running cholesterol. So but I didn't. So we were lucky. And so then Alan raised hell about this. And he basically told me, no, this is how it is. You better get with it. And he pointed me to the books and I read them. And the rest is history. And we were, believe me, for all of our lives, orthorexic. It's like, yeah, actually, we're just smart. That's what we really are. Okay. Now, when I run across an orthorexic, which means a particularly high conscientious, whole food, plant-based vegan, I'm not thinking I've got a psychiatric diagnosis here like the world thinks, because I held that psychiatric diagnosis for the last 40 years. Okay. So no, that's not what that is. What this is, though, is somebody that could really use their anxiety calmed down by understanding the nature of the variables. Okay. So if you understand that, and so if somebody needs to talk to me, fine, I'll talk you through this, or I could do a show on this or whatever. But the point is that there's a reason why Caldwell Esselstyn worked his rear end off in people that were 64 years old and had already had a heart attack. And the answer is because they could still be saved. If the damage was already done and there was nothing to do about it, what the heck's the difference? But Esselstyn showed that no, actually, if you get your act together now and do a really good job, you're going to be able to skate on this thing. You're not going to go the way of your brother. Okay. So the point is, that's why we don't have to be in a panic when we're 36 and we learn about this. You don't have to be perfect either. You need to do a good job. You need to get an A. You need a 94. And some of the orthorexics, you know what I mean, are basically like, I don't know, is a 94 deadly? Is it going to cost me 10 years of my life? Like, I'm not sure that's good enough, Dr. Lisle. And it's like, okay, I need to explain the facts to you. You need to actually know what the science shows us. And the science shows us that the difference between a 94 and 100 on this paper isn't very much at all. Okay, it's about what it is in school, i.e., they both got an A, but one of them got a special commendation letter from that prof to get into grad school. Okay, if you want a special commendation for Alan Goldhammer for being perfect, have at it. I'll applaud for you. I'll applaud for you. Okay, but the bottom line is you're going down into the ground 6 feet under within 2 weeks of where you're going anyway. So don't make too big a deal out of this. And but without understanding those parameters, how would you know? And so that's so I don't consider that this lifestyle draws us there. I think the intelligence and the information make us susceptible to those inferences. But we could, you know, if you know anybody caught in that trap, give them my number.
So I don't think Dr. Goldhammer is perfect, and I'll tell you why. Because
Yeah.
I've spoken at many conferences with him recently too. And when he goes to these conferences, he just assumes everything is SOS free. And I saw him eat stuff I would never eat, like Beyond Meat, because he doesn't like take the time to investigate. I've seen this for the past 10 years. I saw him eat something with Vegenaise at the Texas conference. He just eats whatever is served at these conferences, and he does so. I think I'm more conscientious than him.
Here
I
we
do
are.
it because of food allergies mostly.
Ignorance is bliss.
Yeah. I've seen him do it time and time again. He was eating the Beyond Meat.
Oh, I have to tell you, he refuses to give up. He's like a dog with a bone. He will say, John McDougall's right about everything except salt. John McDougall's right about everything except salt. And that is a bone that Alan will not give up. And if you have him on the show and you talk to him that I raise this issue, you'll get both barrels aimed right at you to bounce off of you to me, that he's going to do this thing. And so I understand his point. I wrote a major paper with him on this and hypertension, 20 years ago. I understand what he's saying, and he's got a lot of points, but you can also overdo it. Alan Goldhammer is orthorexic about salt while he'll put something in his mouth that has salt in it.
Next time I'll shoot a video. I've seen it time and time again. And then I point it out to him and he'll stop eating it, but he never does the initial investigation.
That's the truth, because in that high IQ brain, he knows damn well that he knows he's getting a 97 and I'm getting a 94, but he knows as long as he's better than me, he can gloat and look down his nose, but he's not 100. Okay. And I know that you were a perfect person for 10 years. And finally, one day, you looked in the mirror and you said, wait a minute.
I'm missing out on sandwiches.
Yeah. So anyway, that's a very long answer, and I even kind of forget what the question is, but it was a worthwhile answer anyway.
It was about orthorexia. And, I hear from people that, like, if their children go into programs for eating disorders, dietitians automatically assume that just any type of vegan diet that means they're orthorexic in the regular world. They look at veganism, just even if you're healthy vegan or even if you're a junk food vegan, the fact that you're eliminating food groups, well, that's orthorexia.
Oh, I know. And what can you say? They're ignorant as hell and they're dangerous.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Joanne would like to know, Dr. Lisle, what's the remedy for lack of motivation in general?
The remedy is what it's always been. So the remedy for lack of motivation is poverty and hunger. So this has always been the motivation for all animal life, has been hunger and insecurity. That will get animals off their asses and get them moving as effectively as possible. So you will find people that have no hunger. They're living in evolutionarily novel material circumstances where they don't have anything like that. And as a result, they actually don't have to move a muscle in order to be extremely well fed. Okay, that's a problem. So this is what I call the animal in a zoo. So if you put an animal in a zoo, they can be very healthy and they'll outlive their brethren that are in the wild because they won't have accidents and predation, and they won't have a vet there, out in the wild. If you get an infection, you may not be able to fight it off, but if you get an infection in the zoo, some freaking person with a degree in veterinary studies from UC Davis will take your blood out of your little paw, and then they'll run it through the lab, and they'll come back, and then they'll give you an antibiotic to make sure that you live. So by God, you're going to live longer than everybody. But you're not going to be very happy because you're an animal in a zoo. Okay. So that's the answer to your question. And now the issue is, well, what do I do about that? Because my material circumstances are fine. And in fact, I don't have material circumstances that are guiding me to actually doing anything more. And the answer is, okay. Can you envision any circumstances where your circumstances would be better? More friends, better romance, seeing Paris. Like, is there anything that you want to do? And what is stopping you from doing it? And the answer might be, oh, well, I'd have to go to a bunch of hassle. Okay, well, you're not that motivated. It's not that important to you. Doesn't surprise me any. Animals in a zoo could do things, but they don't. We found out that the tigers in the San Francisco Zoo could have actually escaped that damn zoo, and all they had to do is run up a hill, but they didn't have any motivation to do it until some creep stood on top of the thing and waved at them and taunted the tigers. And then they found out the hard way that the tigers could have got out of there, and everybody found out. Okay, so but otherwise those tigers were sitting in that cage that they could have escaped any time. The tigers didn't even know it because they didn't put any effort into doing that. Anyway, that's tragedy, but I have limited sympathy for the kids that got themselves in trouble. I have tremendous sympathy for somebody else that died and the tiger that got shot. Anyway, so if you're unmotivated, I can tell you this, that there would be a variety of ways to look at this problem. That for me, I've lived probably about 3/4 of my life now. And so I'm down to the last 25%. That means that the hours are precious. So my best estimate is that I probably have about 100,000 waking hours left. So I'm fortunate that I basically get to do with those waking hours, what other people would allow me to do. So in other words, I can't make people love me that I might want to love me. I can't beat Andre Agassi at tennis if I wanted to beat Andre Agassi at tennis. But I'm a free person in a free society where I get to go spend that 100,000 hours. I'm fortunate that I don't have to spend them on a factory floor. There's people that will have to spend, they'll have to be working till they're 72 to secure some retirement. I'm not in that situation. So I also don't have expensive tastes. As you can tell by my shirt that I got for $9. I don't have expensive tastes, so that I can kind of spend my hours doing what is it that I want to do. I'm never bored. There's always something interesting. There's always something interesting to learn, something interesting to do, something interesting to plan to do in the future. There's people and there's animals that I love. I could spend a lot of time petting my cats, and I can spend time talking to the people that I love and that I like. There isn't enough time, and it'll be a shame when it's gone. But I'm going to try to fill those 100,000 hours with the most interesting and most joyful things that I can. And I want to eat really good food that tastes good, but it also feels healthy when I digest it. These are the things. I have a new thing in the world that I'm crazy about. It's a girl named Caitlin Clark. Okay. So Caitlin Clark is I believe the most important woman athlete in history. And she uses a shooting technique that I actually discovered. And so she accidentally knows how to do it. And so does Steph Curry. And those are the two greatest shooters in the world. And I actually know how they do it, and I don't think they know. And so one day I'm going to shoot a video, hopefully with Dr. Alan Goldhammer, as I show the world how the physiology of their technique and what makes them unique and what makes them uniquely successful. But there's no end to the joy. And I'd love to watch her play because she's not just a great shooter. She's an incredible young lady with with a point guard's pass first, unselfish mentality that you betray your personality on a basketball court, and she betrays a very giving team first human, and I love watching her play. Not to mention she is born with a unique genius for the game. So, hey, I didn't see this coming. Are you kidding me? You Melissa will say, "We go. How many times you guys get in front of the TV and watch Caitlin Clark highlights?" And the answer is, I'll tell you something funny about it, AJ. This is how there's new things in the world, and your show, you always open with I'm Chef AJ, and I'm here to share with you, interesting people that are doing things I think you should know about. Exactly. The world's full of interesting people and interesting things. And so if you're not motivated, then, open your eyes and look at the world and look at your life as a precious gift that only has so many hours in it, and you don't know how many hours it is. And try to fill it with people and things that give you joy. And believe me, I feel so grateful that Caitlin Clark exists, because that girl is going to give me 1,000 hours of joy in the next 10 years, to watch her development and watch her become a young lady, and watch what happens in her career. And I wish her nothing but success and joy in the process. She's an incredible young person. So anyway, that's my Caitlin Clark pitch.
Well, Caitlin, it's Caitlin.
Caitlin,
Okay.
Caitlen, or L-I-N. I think it's L-E-N. Caitlin Clark.
Okay, I'm going to write it
A
down.
unique human being in the world of sport.
Gonna check her out. Well, the question on motivation, I couldn't help think about one of the questions we get all the time when we do the reboot program, is that people are looking for motivation just to start a health weight loss journey. And what I've always said is that for me, the habits were more important than the motivation, because I don't wake up every day wanting to exercise. I don't like it. Or even having to eat the healthy. My systems are set up like that. It's just the way the whole house is set up. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, of course, I should have gone right to the thing about motivation about weight loss and healthy living rather than motivation more broadly. But I would say this, and so this is the kind of parameter estimate that I try to pound under somebody's fingernails, which is that if you don't know what it feels like to live really healthfully, and you don't know what your body's going to do if you treat it really well, it's worth a 30-day experience once in your life to do it. It's worth it. Okay. Why wouldn't we? As Alan would say, you're not going to die of a pleasure deficiency. Let's just go ahead and do this. Do it. Let's do it right once. We have a parallel thing coming in the world, and it's already here, and it's already really ominous and disturbing. And that is, can we take a 16-year-old kid and get him to shut off their cell phone for a week? Okay, it's like, look out. TikTok is here. The algorithms are getting brilliant. They're curating everything that gets in front of your eyes to particularly, I heard from a friend of mine that it must be true because he's really savvy, computer savvy. He asked me, well, do you do TikTok? I said, no. And he says, yeah, don't. Let me tell you what they do. He says, what they do is your cell phone can actually look at you. So they've got algorithms that are watching your eyes and your micro expression reactions. And so it's part of the system, apparently. And so as a result of that, then the algorithms will change, and they will know what stimuli to put in front of you to make sure that you're staring at that screen more. It's like, ooh, that's really, really bad. And it's like, that's right. It's like they're trying to figure out what will work like cocaine to your attention. Okay. And so now, you got people staring at screens 50 hours a week. You got kids doing that rather than playing volleyball with their friends or riding bicycles. It's like, this is not good. Okay. And so, and yet these kids may never know what it feels like to go to Y camp. You know what I mean? And just go around a fire and hear ghost stories and do stuff like that. It's like, that's what they should be doing. And so in the same way that if you're not motivated, like, yeah, you're not motivated the way a TikTok addict isn't motivated either, but we're smarter than this. We can be smarter than this. You can freaking put down the addictive thing. It can be done. And you need to take it seriously. So in this life, are you ever, well, I got this 40 pounds, never seem to be able to lose it. Well, have you actually made a very, very serious effort? And were those serious efforts sufficiently well informed that they were likely to be successful? And the answer is probably not. Okay. I just talked to a young man who's a friend of mine. He's not a client. That he's, about 100 and he's probably about 150 pounds overweight. And I love this kid. And he's really smart. And we have another little other thing that we are involved with each other. He's a very smart computer cat. And I told him today, I said, you know that I know a lot about weight loss. You know that I wouldn't charge you anything. You know that I want really badly to fix you. And he goes, I know. I go, okay, you can call me anytime and I'm ready to work with you. Okay. Because nothing would give me greater pleasure than to have you successful. And he goes, I know, but I'm going to do it my way. I said, okay. All right. I wish him success, but I'm ready to help him. And the same would be said for somebody that's sitting on the sideline right now, can't quite get motivated. It's like, well, maybe you need an outside influence. Maybe you need to call me. Okay. I also have other people that are nicer and friendlier and warmer and more feminine and are also inspiring that I work with that are great. I've got 2 or 3 of these people that I refer people to that are wonderful. And I keep them hidden most of the time. I don't know, someday I may expose them. But the truth of the matter is that if you need get some motivation, that kind of motivation, maybe you need some help and you need some assistance. Because a lot of times, if you don't do something, it's because you're not sure you can and you're not sure you will. But if you had a friend or a guide, you could. And so maybe that might be helpful.
Thank you.
Okay.
We have 3 questions remaining. One is
Got
on
it.
trauma, one is on the cram circuit, and one is on the environment. Do you have a favorite?
Start right in a row. Tell me the trauma one.
Okay. Oh, I had this third, but okay, here we go. So that is from Emily. Hi, Dr. Lisle. Do you have any specific advice for holistically working on complex post-traumatic stress? I've just found out that I'm dealing with this, and it's a big factor behind my lifelong challenges with my mental health and with food. I'm sure I'm likely not alone in this. I see a therapist. I'm trying to focus on eating better by doing the reboot program. I'm focusing on my sleeping routine and doing mindfulness meditation every day. I'm just so sick of being exhausted to the point of burnout and living in survival mode all the time. I want to take my life back in my own hands. I'm feeling like healing from trauma is the key, as that is the root of many of my challenges. But how do I actually do that on a deeper level?
Okay. It's understandable that the therapist that you talk to and other people believe that that's true. Okay. It is not true. So the problems that you have with food and other issues in your life have nothing to do with trauma. This is it's an easily understood mistake. It goes back, by the way, it goes back to the 1890s in Vienna to Sigmund Freud. This is the root of this. You should know that in other cultures, they don't have this idea. It doesn't even occur to them. They literally don't have the language. They don't have a word of trauma. So this is a Western European phenomenon. And it is now a 20th and 21st century phenomenon in the United States and in the Western world. Try that in Singapore and they'll look at you like, what do you mean? What you're saying is trauma is just, that they call those bad memories. It's like, yeah, you got some bad memories. Yeah, that's what that is. They do not see it as a causal agent of disturbing self-destructive behavior in the present 30 years later. That is a Freudian inference, and it is incorrect, and there's not a single scrap of evidence to support it. So this is my position, and so therefore, if you're intimidated by the idea that your trauma needs to be healed in order for you to get on track, you might want to risk a session with me, and I'm generally not greedy, but I can tell you a session like that, you better make it an hour. Don't make it a half an hour, because I actually have a lot to say as I walk you through the logic of how your mind works so that you cannot be afraid of your mind. So that you're not afraid that your mind is actually damaged and slightly deranged and therefore has some healing that it needs to do. It's going to turn out, no, that isn't the case. The problems that you're having in different motivational areas are problems that of motivation that surround the parameters within those domains. It has nothing to do with things that happened deep in your past. It's super understandable why people believe that's true. The human mind is a pattern recognition machine, as all animal minds. And Freud was not an evil genius. He and his brethren were smart people trying to figure out why they were seeing what they were seeing, and they came up with a theory, and it was a plausible theory, but it's a theory that actually is not true. Your therapist that is telling you that that's true is a well-meaning, misguided, miseducated professional. And that's okay. That doesn't make them a bad person at all. I think they're completely on your side and they're trying to help you, but they actually do not understand the architecture of the mind. They have a superficial understanding that is incorrect. They're a little bit like a kid trying to explain to you Einstein's theory of relativity. It's like, they kind of have some words that fit, but kid, you're only 12 years old and you're pretty smart, but you actually don't know what you're talking about. And so that is the story of how that works. I can step you through the logic and help you to see and empower you, as I have done with hundreds of people that have had this misunderstanding, and hopefully help you turn a corner in your motivation in your life.
I wonder if we should ever revisit the lecture you gave in Vegas in 2019, Not Your Trauma, Not Your Mama, because that's not available anywhere.
Well, yeah, we'll do something like that one day. We'll do that. But the book that I'm completing, you know what I mean? I lay out some of the logic and understanding that is hopefully very clear to people. So but yes, I'm going to have to be, when the book is released, I will be probably, it's kind of one of these things where the book's going to be 500 pages long and there's going to be 100 issues, but that's probably going to be the issue that's going to be the biggest firestorm. You know what I mean? That's going to be, probably not. When I look at that thing, I don't think it should be. There's so many different things to talk about in the search for human beings for health and happiness, that I have so many different concepts that I cover, but that will be one of them. In other words, there are many mistakes in modern psychology and psychotherapy, and that is one of the big ones. So that, fortunately, it's what I call one of the least welcome best news in world history. Okay, it's like, it's really good news that we don't have that problem. It has not received, the proof of that has not received a warm welcome from the world, but that doesn't mean that we shouldn't welcome it warmly. And it's a big relief, and it's been a big relief to many of my clients to find out that they didn't have to excavate and fix something that was broken, because there wasn't anything broken. What we had is problems in the present that we needed to understand better.
You've talked about this a lot in context of the trauma not being the reason for the inability or difficulty staying on the diet. But if somebody really does have PTSD, do you have a treatment for that?
Oh, yeah. In other words, PTSD is generally self-limiting. It's not a disorder. It's actually a design feature of the organism. If you get in a catastrophic auto accident, you should be afraid of getting in a car for a while, and that will generally last about 2 years. A very catastrophic problem, whether you're sexual assault or a life-threatening process or things like this, a tremendous loss. Those things are built into the nervous system as usually being 2-year events that you never forget. But in other words, the emotional upheaval over those things goes through a decay function to where they go to close to zero, 5 years later. They're close to zero 2 years later. The reason is that biology has to warn you and sensitize you to something terrible so that it's unlikely to happen again. It has to basically tell you, wow, you almost bought the farm, or wow, you almost got impregnated with some sociopath's sperm. In other words, these are very, very dangerous and important biological events, and it's important that the nervous system be sensitized and highly anxious about features of the environment that were present when these catastrophic losses took place. So, if you ran over your own dog in a driveway, you're never going to forget it, but you're going to be miserable about it for months. Okay. So, but 5 years from now, you're not. It will be a passing thought, as it should be. It should be a file that remains in the nervous system forever, but it's not a boll weevil that is wrecking your cotton crop. It is not destroying anything. It's just a file that is there to assist you to make sure that we never have a tragedy like that again. That is what, quote, post-traumatic stress is. To call it a disorder, that was a made-up concept, and it has validity because some people's PTS is extended, and then there are ways that we help them unwind that PTS. Usually have nothing to do with sitting around in psychotherapy talking about it. So usually the only way to get over being afraid of being on a horse is to get back on a horse. The only way to get over Vietnam PTSD is to go back to Vietnam and see that Saigon isn't anything like the Saigon that you are remembering in your memory. It's to update memory systems in a way. If you're a rape victim, it isn't to talk all about the rape trauma. It's to go back to the scene of the crime in broad daylight with friends and think through and talk through what happened and what all your thinking was during the time. In other words, these are the ways that we move through PTSD that has been blocked from its normal decay function. And so this is how we go about this. And, the move my eyeball side to side in EMDR, good luck. This is pie in the sky talk. The nervous system wasn't built with a bag of tricks in it. It was built with extremely logical survival algorithms, as you would expect. And so it generally takes getting over PTSD things exactly the kind of things that you would expect that it would take. And so there's more to it than that. I worked for 2 years in the National Center for PTSD in Palo Alto. And so I saw the best that the world had to offer, and I saw how feeble the clinical thinking was and the attempts were. Since that time, we've learned more. That was, my God, 30 years ago. So since that time, we've learned more about this, and I think I can speak fairly confidently about trauma and about its sequelae and about how it is that we would go about trying to ameliorate those problems if we needed to. So that's how that works. But from the sound of it, if you're thinking that your food problems have to do with something that happened in childhood, you have been told something that is grossly incorrect. And there is an easier way to get and a more effective way to get to the root of those struggles. You have to look around you and see that the entire world is in that pleasure trap. And you have to understand that they all didn't go through that trauma that you went through. Why are they having the problem that you are having? And the answer is the problem is not a mistake inside you. You are living in a pathological environment that is trapping the motivational systems of humanity. That is why you have the problem. And getting around that is one hell of a challenge. That is the challenge. The challenge is not to fix something that is motivationally askew with you. That is a mistake of understanding. Freud, did not understand. He thought his own freaking cigar addiction had to do with some, trauma that took place at his mother's breast, in the oral stage of development. I mean, this guy did not understand how life works, and yet his thinking reverberates on us 100 years later to misguided clinical action. So yeah, that's where I would go. And if you want to talk about it, I'm open to that discussion. Okay. All right. What else we got, AJ?
Okay. I'll keep going as long as you want to keep going. This is from Colleen. Is it possible to be successful eating this way when you live with people who eat more calorically dense processed foods? Maybe I'm deluding myself, but I'm hoping that if I can resist these foods in my home environment, I'll be even better at it when I go out. The food my partner keeps are not really things I even like, though they happen to be more processed high-calorie foods. I just think of it as not my food and ignore them, have him put more triggering things that I might feel tempted by in a cupboard where I can't see them.
Do the best you can. You know what I mean? I think it's pretty difficult, and I think that we need cooperation sometimes from partners, and sometimes that cooperation seems quote unreasonable to them, but it's not unreasonable. Like you can imagine if you had somebody that was an alcoholic, And we had somebody that lived with them that just poured themselves a glass of wine every night that wasn't an alcoholic. It's like, and they just poured it right in front of them and left the open bottle on the table. It's like, what about that? Well, hey, I'm not encouraging you, just stay out of it. It's like, yeah, that's naive about how difficult the pleasure trap is. So yeah, you can do all the things you're talking about, and but I can tell you that this is not easy. I have a client that rates with AJ for conscientiousness. They are actually similar. They are sisters from another mother, and they are way out over the chart. They're both 1 in 5,000 for conscientiousness. We're talking about 99.99 kind of stuff. These are the freaks. And that lady lives with a guy who would be self-indulgent as hell, not living with Charles. And so for 15 years, I watched this like a windshield wiper go back, where she would hold the line, cook him his food, then be fine. And then she'd call me up 4 months later. I'm so disgusted with myself. There's no reason I shouldn't. I don't know why it is that I'm getting into the trouble. I shouldn't do this. There's no reason why. I know it's disgusting, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, you're trying to do something that is almost impossible. I don't know that I could. I'm confident that I couldn't do it. So you're asking too much of yourself. Well, that's just ridiculous. Okay. So then she'd tell him, okay, we're not doing that anymore. You're going to have to eat your stuff elsewhere. And then they do that for a little while. And then he'd want this, and the line would be moved over, and he's a sweet guy. And so then she'd move the line over, and then she'd be back in the trap. Now, I must have watched this oscillation 10 times. And then finally, about 4 years ago, she said, that's it, I'm done. No. We're not having any of your crap in the house. You can go to the country club. Okay. You can do whatever you want. No, this house is pristine. This is how we're going to live. And sweet guy. And he's like, okay. You know what I mean? He was okay because he'd been put through this ringer before. He was ready. But she tried her best to be accommodating. And if that person can't do it, if Chef AJ can't do it, it can't be done. So you're asking a lot of yourself. And if you're going to have that situation, then in this case, you would need quite substantial cooperation out of a partner. So my gal, wound up being all or nothing. It's like, no, we're done. But there would be ways that could make it much easier for you and much better. Locked cabinets, locked refrigerators, things of that nature, possibly. Where I have a refrigerator in my house because, my house has other people in it, and other people have food that I don't like. And I have my own refrigerator, and I don't even see that refrigerator anymore. It's the big one. I walk right past it in my kitchen. All I see is my refrigerator. My refrigerator is where my food is, and none of your crap goes in my refrigerator. You can have anything you want out of it, but you can't put anything in it. Okay. And so they have their refrigerator. I have my refrigerator, and that works for me. I don't go into their refrigerator looking for stuff. Never happens. I don't even see it. So these are the kinds of things that I would have you do. In other words, remember, the problem here, folks, is in your environment. It's not inside you. So what you need to do to your environment, we don't know what lengths you need. Whether, I've told people I could solve all of your problems, your loneliness, your lack of flirtation feedback from the world and thinking that you're not attractive, the fact that you're unemployed, the fact that you feel economically insecure and like a loser secondary to other people, the fact that you don't have any friends. I can solve the fact that you got an addiction problem with something, the thing that you eat junk food and you're overweight. I can solve it all. All I have to do is take you on a plane and take you back to the Kalahari where your genes evolved. All I have to do is have you join the Bushmen of the Kalahari. Just go live with them for a year. You won't have any of these problems. Okay? All of the problems will go away. It's like, wow, isn't that interesting? You may have other problems. The bitch in the village that's, trying to steal your guy from you. Okay, well, that's human nature. The fact that you accidentally insulted somebody and they haven't gotten over it, so there's some bad blood. That's human nature. There's a lot of things we can't solve, but there's an awful lot of things we can. And that is because so many of the problems that we face today are directly the result of the environment that you live in. The environment is beautiful and spectacular. It is also dangerous and evil. Okay. So we have to look at that environment and take it seriously. If you want to improve something important in your life, work harder on your environment than you do on yourself. Okay.
Yeah. I
All right. One
I've
more.
okay. I've often heard the phrase environment always wins.
Yeah.
So, oh man, there's two more. So
Oh,
cram.
two more. Okay.
I'm so
I could do it.
sorry. Well, this one I think is going to be easy for you.
Okay.
I didn't see this one, but this Jay says, is it really good to eat so many potatoes, sweet potatoes, rice, and oats? I've heard a neurologist named Dr. Perlmutter say that for brain health to eliminate grains. I haven't eaten oats in 13 years because I heard how bad they are for our digestive tract and body.
BS.
I figured that would be a quick one.
Yeah, forget it. Don't worry about it.
Yeah,
You
absolutely. Okay.
Your ancestors, people will worry about this, that, and the other with food. Your ancestors ate what was available. Okay. And so if there's potatoes, rice, beans, corn, and wheat, believe me, that's what they were eating. Generally, they weren't. They were eating 2 or 3 of these big starches. They were eating some animal food that they killed. They were eating some honey, and they were eating vegetables, and they were eating some nuts, and they were eating some salad greens and fruit. Okay. So they're eating whatever they could get their hands on. I wouldn't worry about the poisonous nature of, potatoes and grains or anything else. Now, there are people that don't do well with grains. Okay. So like Alan doesn't do so well with grains. So he just basically eats very few grains these days. That's fine. You can kind of experiment with yourself. If you got some digestive difficulties, or some people might even get some inflammation out of it. We don't know. It might be glyphosate that's been sprayed on the wheat for the last 30 years. Like this, who knows? But don't think that they're deficient in things for your health, for God's sakes. Not a chance. Okay, so yeah, don't worry about what Dr. Schmo says. All
Yeah,
right.
I had dinner with Dr. Perlmutter once at Rancho La Puerta, and he was saying how terrible Dr. Esselstyn's program is, and that I need to eat oil or I'm going to have a stroke, and that my cholesterol is too low. So,
oh my God, that's
was
great.
So funny. And they really don't really serve oil there. It's very low oil, but he asked for oil to pour on his greens. It was crazy.
This is somebody that has a compelling but superficial understanding of the body's anatomy and physiology. So like a Freudian therapist, they have a compelling, in other words, it makes sense to him. He believes it. He's seen that when you pour oil in, the HDL does this, and therefore that's a good thing. It's like, oh, no, you're not understanding. You're not understanding the overall evolutionary biology of the system. Show me where there's oil in nature, and I'm going to tell you, you aren't going to find it. That had to be refined out of something. Okay. It had to be artificially, put together. And when you do that, you wind up with imbalances that can be forced on the body and its metabolic systems, and you'll wind up with compromises in its function as a result. Obviously. That's why don't go in a tanning bed, for God's sakes. How many young women have had to find out the hard way, when they're 40, that they burn themselves to a crisp when they're 22, looking better with an artificial stimulus, and now they've got aging cues that they wish they didn't have. There you go. This is why we do things the way we do things. Dr. Esselstyn is not wrong. Okay. He may be wrong about how bad it is to eat nuts. But that's because he's being overly cautious about those fats. So, but yeah, don't be pouring oil on things. Forget about it. All right.
Thank you.
On we go.
Last question from
wait a second. There's a reason why Colin Campbell very carefully is not to be cute. There's a reason why, his most theoretical book and the most important high concept book that he wrote is called Whole. That's why he named it that. Okay. That's what he was trying to say. And you look at what Dr. Esselstyn is saying and recommending, and then looking at what this guy's saying, and you tell me which one is honoring whole. That's the concept. Okay. Oil is not whole. Okay. Oil is a fractionated, highly processed food. Okay. Is it a disaster? Well, it's got problems associated with it. No matter what benefit anybody thinks they see, there are going to be problems, and it's going to be ultimately a negative, because you're looking at something that is an unnatural fractionated thing, and it's going to have metabolic consequences. So yeah, there's a reason why almost all these guys are going to say no deal. I don't think Furman gives a thumbs up to oil. Alan doesn't. John didn't. Colin doesn't, Caldwell doesn't, Neil doesn't. There's a reason. If they thought there wasn't compelling evidence against it, if they didn't think there's compelling evidence, they wouldn't raise a fuss about it. There is compelling evidence, and that's why they are warning that, hey, watch it. It's sure as hell something you don't need, for God's sakes. Okay, that's the end of that. We go on to the next one.
Okay, last question. Yeah, and if people want, eat olives, not olive oil. It makes sense to me. Anna says, I found it really interesting to learn about the cram circuit. And I wonder if I am cramming more of the healthy food after my meal, when it would have been better to just have one serving and walk away and break that circuit of eating until very full. Can eating too much low-calorie density too be another form of cramming? And if so, could you please provide some advice on stopping this? Should I just set out one serving? When it's done, do something to distract myself until the craving passes?
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I guess I would say watch the conditioned cram. That's a webinar that I've done that's on the free part of my website. It takes you through the logic here. It's actually a little bit complicated, not that complicated, but it's just complicated enough. You can classically condition a human being to be expecting that it's going to eat a bunch of food after it's already full. And one of the reasons it may get goaded into that is that it was eating a diet that was actually overly low in calorie density because they were trying to lose weight or they were trying to be super clean. And they needed that diet to be slightly enriched. They needed to be in higher calorie density in order for the satiation mechanisms to work in reasonable concert, so that the stretch reception and nutrient reception basically were giving basically the same signal. If I tried to just fill up on potatoes or something like that, that's a little low in calorie density. If I tried to make that the heart and soul of my diet, at 400 calories a pound, that's lower than the organism was designed for. I'm going to have to eat high volume. And I may start searching for high density calories late in the day to sort of make up a rolling caloric deficit where I stretch my stomach out and I've eaten 1,700 calories of very healthy low calorie density food by 8 o'clock. But by 10:30, my nervous system is saying, we're like 300 or 400 calories short, buddy. And so now I start looking for some snack and it's rich. And now I sort of classically condition that rhythm. And now I start craving it even when I'm full. So the solution isn't just to necessarily walk away from the food. It's also to make sure that we aren't a little bit out of kilter with sometimes what can be an overly conservative, very low calorie density diet that's encouraging that kind of behavior late in the game at night. So these are little details to this. So a lot of people, they do eat enough. They eat enough calories, and then they've classically conditioned treat seeking in the nighttime. I've had people that had insomnia and they're waking up at 1:30 every morning. That's because when they get up, they eat some cookies and milk, for God's, almond milk and almond cookies or whatever the hell it is. But the point is, they've actually classically conditioned their mind to wake up to get a treat. Okay. They can't figure out why they can't get back to sleep until they eat the treat. It's like, well, the cat's going to keep meowing until you feed it. That's how that works. And so classical conditioning in this way is, in this particular problem, has been an underappreciated little Achilles heel in the human learning system. And so, and the way through it, if we actually are eating a well enough balanced diet by 7 or 8 o'clock at night, the correct thing to do is to walk away and not go back, and to do that every single night for a couple of weeks. Okay. In other words, don't give in, because you have to, this is Pavlov ringing the bell. Once you've conditioned the organism that ringing the bell is going to give the dog food, when you ring that bell, it's going to salivate like crazy, and it's going to whine and cry till you feed it. Okay. So, and then what's going to happen is if you feed it, then you've just conditioned it again for the next night. But if you ring the bell and then it whines and cries and you don't feed it, and then the next night you ring the bell and it whines and cries and you don't feed it, and then you do it again and again, dog's not hungry. It's classically conditioned. We're not starving the dog. The dog's perfectly satiated, but this is this treat that we keep feeding it at 10 o'clock at night. If we continue to ring that, the bell will ring at 10 o'clock. Believe me, you'll look around. It's like it's 10 o'clock. This is that time when we go get the, cashew butter out. Okay. But if we don't do that, then after a couple of weeks, the same thing will happen to you as will happen to Pavlov's dogs. That when you ring the bell, it'll be a shrug. It'll be like, it'll lift its head up, but it's not going to run over there and bark because it's not worth it because it doesn't think it's going to get fed. This is part of the nature of learning. So we call it counter conditioning or counter learning, but no, it's actually learning. It's learning something new. And that is that the conditions have changed. And the energy involved in begging for that food is no longer going to be effective. So the energy conservation programming that is imperative in all motivation will stop having you get off your rear end to go do it. So that's why the right thing to do is get the stuff out of your house and then hold the line for a couple of weeks. And at the end of that week, you will have counter conditioned the conditioned cram. Okay. That is how to do that. The darn thing about conditioning is if you feed it just once, those dogs are wide awake every night now. All you got to do is break it once and they're like, wow, we're back in the game. And they're going to bark at you for the next week if you don't feed it again tomorrow night. So keep in mind that once you're conditioned to this, you're kind of always conditioned. And so you're always going to be sensitive there. It's not a trap a mile deep, but it's a trap. And so that is the way out of that trap. And you can, once out, you can stay out.
Great. Well, you once said that sometimes people overeat on a low calorie density food because they just need to spike the diet a little bit with some tofu or avocado or corn tortillas, and then they won't eat so much low calorie density food.
That's right. And they won't be sniffing around for rich food later. So this is trying to get things in balance as best we can.
Great. This was great, Dr. Lisle. Thank you. I learned so much.
Grand, AJ. Always good to see you, and we'll see you soon.
I'll see you next month. And thanks to all of you for watching another episode of Chef AJ Live. Please come back Friday for a special show at 11 a.m. with Dr. Bob Brieke. He's going to talk about 8 keys to success.